Welcome to The Debate. If you look at classical architecture, you'll often see these massive singular stone columns sitting just, well, dead in the center of a room, and they hold up the entire weight of a vaulted ceiling all by themselves.
Right.
They are the solitary, load-bearing pillars of the structure. And in modern life, whether we realize it or not, we constantly position ourselves as that exact column.
We really do. We look at our families, our companies, our personal projects, and we subconsciously conclude that if we shift even a single inch, the entire structure is going to collapse into rubble.
Exactly. And today, we're examining a text that directly addresses that heavy vaulted ceiling we're all carrying around. We are looking at the Bhagavadgita's profound solutions for modern professional and, well, personal exhaustion.
It's such a timely topic.
It really is. Specifically, we're exploring a fascinating tension found in the translation and commentary on two distinct verses, Shlokas 5.29 and 6.1. And, it's worth noting the text explicitly skips over 5.30 to seamlessly connect these two concepts.
Right, because they represent two very different paths out of the exact same crisis.
Precisely. So the central question we're debating today is this. In addressing our modern crises of burnout and hyper-responsibility, where does the ultimate path to peace lie? Does it lie in spiritual delegation, where we surrender the outcomes of our work to a higher cosmic power, which is the focus of Shloka 5.29?
Or does it lie in active renunciation, where we dismantle our transactional mindset entirely and find our reward purely in the craftsmanship of the duty itself, as we see in Shloka 6.1. Right. And just to lay our cards on the table, my position is that true peace requires a fundamental shift in who owns the results, meaning we have to delegate the ultimate outcome to a benevolent cosmic force.
And my position is that peace requires a fundamental shift in how we value the action itself, meaning we have to focus entirely on the craft and remain completely detached from those final results.
So to understand why spiritual delegation is so necessary, we really have to look at the specific nature of modern suffering. The commentary on Shloka 5.29 calls this verse the formula for absolute peace.
Which is a pretty big claim.
It is, yeah. But it diagnoses our exhaustion perfectly. The text points out that we suffer from this invisible, heavy burden, the subconscious belief that we are the sole controllers and ultimate managers of our universe.
The illusion of being the general manager of the universe, basically. Exactly. That hyper-responsibility is the breeding ground for, well, everything we're feeling right now. It's why we have chronic anxiety. It's why imposter syndrome is rampant. We treat absolutely everything as a fragile ecosystem.
Oh, completely.
You know the feeling. A minor family dynamic over the holidays, a Tuesday morning staff meeting, even a personal fitness goal. We act like if we stop pushing for even a single second, the whole thing will utterly collapse.
And it's exhausting.
It is physically and mentally draining. And the only way to resolve this immense psychological pressure is through what the text calls spiritual delegation. It requires acknowledging a true partner, a cosmic friend. The Sanskrit term here is a suhridam.
Right, the well-wisher.
Come while still putting in your finest effort. It's the recognition that you are not the sole owner of the results. You're just a contributor to a larger cosmic design.
I come at it from a different way. Because, look, the diagnosis of hyper-responsibility is incredibly accurate. I'll give you that. But I think it only captures half the pathology of modern life. And frankly, it misses a huge piece of the puzzle.
Okay, how so?
Well, the core issue isn't just the burden of control. It is our intensely transactional nature.
What do you mean by transactional, exactly?
I mean, our modern mindset dictates a very specific limiting rule. It basically says, I will only put in effort if the compensation, recognition, or applause is absolutely guaranteed. We have conditioned ourselves to require an immediate return on investment for every drop of energy we expend.
I see what you're saying.
Right? Like, if I send this email on a Sunday, my boss owes me praise. If I work late, the universe owes me a promotion.
So you're saying the exhaustion is rooted in the expectation, not just the effort.
Precisely. Shloka 6.1 cuts through what the commentary brilliantly calls the illusion of escape. Because, think about it, when people get burned out by these constant transactions, what do?
They quit.
Yeah, they think the answer is quitting their job, right? Moving to a quiet cabin in the woods, or, quiet quitting and detaching entirely from their responsibilities. But true peace isn't delegating the result away. It is action without transaction.
Which looks like what, practically?
It looks like doing the work simply because it needs to be done. The text refers to this as karyam karma. You do the work, you let the excellence of the act be its own reward, and you sever that psychological dependency on what the work gets you in return. That is what defines a true renunciant, a true sannyasi. It's not about what you wear or hiding in a cave, it's about how you show up to your daily duties without demanding a receipt.
Look, I hear you on the transactional piece. I really do. But I think that constant demand for a receipt is just a symptom of a much deeper fear.
A deeper fear?
Yeah. Burnout is primarily a weight-bearing issue. We suffer deeply because we view life as inherently hostile, and consequently we feel profoundly isolated in our struggles. Let's look at the specific language in 5.29.
Okay.
It asks us to realize the ultimate enjoyer of all sacrifices. The term is bhoktaram yajna tapasam. That phrasing is critical because it implies that someone else is receiving the effort. Someone else is holding the net.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Relying on someone else to hold the net is exactly the problem with this framework.
Let me finish the thought, though. If we don't fundamentally believe that someone else is holding the net, we can never truly rest. The transactional nature you're talking about, that desperate need to extract value right now,
Yeah?
that comes directly from feeling completely alone in managing your universe. Spiritual delegation addresses the root fear by providing a cosmic partner to catch you when you inevitably fall.
So the problem with relying on a cosmic friend to hold the net is that it's just another escape hatch. It's passing the psychological buck. You are still deeply attached to the result. You're just hoping a benevolent force will handle the logistics for you so you don't have to stress about it.
Well, no, it's about shifting the cognitive load.
But the real grinding exhaustion of modern life, the kind that makes you dread opening your inbox, that comes from the relentless cognitive load of calculating the ROI of our actions. We are constantly monitoring the metrics. We are tracking the likes on a post, the nod from the boss during a presentation, the gratitude from a spouse for doing the dishes.
But isn't that just human nature? I mean, we want our efforts to be validated. It's how we know we're on the right track.
Validated, sure. But held hostage by? No. Relying on Shloka 6.1, we see that a true yogi acts without depending on the fruits of action. Anashrita, karma phalam. The exhaustion doesn't come from feeling alone in the universe. It comes from the fact that our emotional baseline is perpetually held hostage by outcomes that are entirely outside of our control.
Okay, but
If you just delegate the outcome to the universe but maintain your desire for a specific result, you haven't actually cured the transactional mindset. You've just outsourced the anxiety. You're still checking the mailbox, waiting for the universe's check to arrive.
But that outsourcing is a vital, necessary cognitive release. Think about the physical body for a moment. Treating life like a fragile ecosystem where you have to manage every outcome is like trying to manually regulate your own heartbeat.
Wait, manually regulate your heartbeat?
Yes. Imagine if you had to consciously command your heart to beat, 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 expand lungs, digest food. Every single second of the day is totally unsustainable. You would collapse in minutes from the mental exhaustion alone.
Well, sure, physically speaking.
And yet, that is exactly what we are doing to our external lives. We are trying to manually pump the blood of the universe. When you launch a startup or when you are trying to guide your teenager through high school, you try to control every single variable.
And you can't?
Right. So the text gives a highly specific, actionable practice for 529 to counter this. Before a high-stakes task, you take a deep breath and explicitly say to yourself, I will put in my finest effort, but I surrender the final result to the ultimate keeper of the worlds. That isn't passing the buck. That cognitive release is the exact mechanism that allows for high performance. It takes the paralyzing pressure off the immediate moment. You can finally access a state of flow because you are no longer attempting to manually regulate the heartbeat of the outcome.
Okay, the heartbeat analogy is strong, I'll admit. But notice how you focused entirely on a high-stakes task, launching a startup, guiding a teenager. Immense pressure. What about the mundane?
The mundane?
Yeah, because the actionable practice for 6.1 offers a far more sustainable structural change for everyday life. It doesn't ask us to look at high stakes. It asks us to identify a duty in our life right now that we find tedious or emotionally draining. Doing the quarterly tax paperwork, managing a difficult operational spreadsheet, taking out the trash when it's cold and raining.
Right.
Reframing those tasks is where the actual battle for our peace is won or lost.
How so?
The solution 6.1 provides is to approach that tedious duty with the meticulous care of a master craftsman, completely detached from whether anyone notices or thanks you. Think of a master woodworker meticulously sanding the underside of a cabinet, a place literally no one will ever see.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
They aren't looking upward, surrendering the result to the cosmos. Their focus remains entirely in the room, intensely concentrated on the friction of the sandpaper, on the smell of the wood, on the craft itself. The mechanism of relief isn't looking away from the result. It's pouring yourself so entirely into the present action that the very concept of a future result ceases to matter.
Wait, hold on. The master woodworker still needs to sell the cabinet, right?
Well, yes.
They can't just sand wood for free forever. How do you pay your mortgage if you completely cease to care about the results of your work? This idea of pure detached craftsmanship sounds beautiful in a theoretical vacuum, but in a modern economy, outcomes matter. If my startup fails, my employees lose their jobs.
See, that's a common misunderstanding of what detachment means here. Severing the psychological dependency on the result doesn't mean financial negligence or failing your employees. The woodworker still sells the cabinet. They still price it appropriately. The difference is the source of their peace.
Okay.
If they are attached to the result, their peace depends on the customer praising the cabinet, on it selling immediately, on getting 50 likes on Instagram when they post a picture of it.
And if they practice active renunciation?
Then their peace is generated in the act of sanding. They do the work to the absolute highest standard simply because the work demands it. If the cabinet sells, great. If the customer is grumpy, fine. Their emotional baseline isn't destroyed either way. They found their reward in the execution, not the applause.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. Because honestly, this vision of the solitary woodworker finding peace only in the sanding of the wood, it sounds incredibly isolating.
Isolating?
Yeah. It implies that we have to operate as these stoic islands, finding all meaning internally while remaining totally indifferent to the world around us. But human beings are inherently relational. We are wired for connection.
Of course.
When someone is sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic on their way to a job they hate, or dreading opening their inbox on a Monday morning, telling them to just find intrinsic motivation in the craft is a massive ask.
It is a big ask, but it's the only one that puts the control back in their hands.
But that's why the text explicitly offers the relief of Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, the selfless, benevolent friend of all living beings. This concept is revolutionary because it tells us that we aren't meant to negotiate life's hostile landscapes alone. It tells us there is a guiding force actively wishing for our growth, even when the immediate circumstances, like that chaotic Monday morning inbox, are difficult to decipher. If you strip away that cosmic partnership, if you remove the suhridam, you are asking a person who is already completely burned out to suddenly generate an infinite well of intrinsic motivation purely for the sake of duty. That is a very tall order for a human psyche.
I'd argue it's an even taller order to ask someone to believe in a cosmic safety net when their tangible reality feels totally chaotic. And, you're assuming that finding meaning in the craft itself is a cold, lonely experience. The text actually warns us against that exact misinterpretation.
Mourns as how?
Well, true peace in this framework is highly dynamic. Drawing strictly from the commentary on 6.1, we have to redefine what doing nothing really means. The text argues fiercely against equating peace with laziness or physical inaction. It uses the term akriya.
Right, the idea of retreating from the world to protect your energy.
Exactly. Shunning your responsibilities in the name of protecting your peace, which, let's be honest, is a very popular wellness trope right now, often just invites guilt and stagnation. Real peace isn't sitting on a mountain. Real peace is acting with immense passion. It's a hot, vibrant engagement with the material world.
Okay, I see that.
You are fully in the messy reality of the traffic or the difficult job, but you remain completely cool-headed about what happens next. The reward is intrinsic, yes, but intrinsic doesn't mean lonely. It means self-sustaining. When you externalize your peace to a cosmic partner, you are still inherently dependent on an external concept. When you master active renunciation, your peace is portable, it's indestructible, and it is entirely within your own agency.
I have to challenge that because it creates a false dichotomy between agency and surrender.
How so?
The phrase spiritual delegation implies that you have already done the maximum amount of work within your agency. You have negotiated your salary, you have prepared the presentation, you have stayed up late researching the project. Surrender only happens at the exact boundary where human agency ends. And let's be brutally honest about modern burnout. It occurs precisely because we refuse to acknowledge where that boundary is.
Well, we do tend to think we can push through any barrier if we just work harder.
Exactly. We think if we just worry a little bit more, if we lose just a little more sleep, we can control the macroeconomic factors that affect our business. Or we think we can control the exact way our child's personality develops. We can't. The realization of the Supreme Lord of all world, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, is the ultimate boundary-setting exercise.
Interesting.
It forces the ego to look at a situation and say, I have done my part, the rest is not mine to carry. That isn't giving up your agency. It's having the wisdom to recognize its limits. Hyper-responsibility is actually a subtle form of arrogance.
I agree that boundary setting is crucial, absolutely. But the boundary should be drawn around our expectations, not just our locus of control. When we look at action without transaction, we are addressing the fundamental greed of the ego.
Greed?
Yes, greed. The ego doesn't just want to control the outcome. It wants to be credited for the outcome. The transactional mindset says, if I do X, the universe owes me Y. And when Y doesn't happen, when we don't get the raise or our kid makes a mistake despite our good parenting, we become bitter, cynical, and exhausted.
That's a fair observation.
The active renunciation of 6.1 dismantles the owing. You do the work simply because it needs to be done. Karyam karma. When you truly embody that, there is no bitterness when the applause doesn't come. There is no cynicism when the promotion goes to someone else. You are inoculated against burnout because your energy supply isn't reliant on external validation. You aren't constantly checking the scales to see if the universe has paid you back yet.
So we are essentially looking at two profound structural interventions for the exact same modern disease. From my perspective, surviving the heavy burden of modern life requires a psychological safety net. We have to engage in spiritual delegation, structurally shifting the burden of final outcomes off our shoulders and onto a cosmic partner. By recognizing a benevolent force that enjoys the ultimate fruits of our sacrifices, we relieve ourselves of the crushing delusion that we have to manually beat the heart of the universe. This is what allows us to perform at our highest level, free from the paralyzing anxiety of hyper-responsibility.
And from my perspective, the safety net is built by fundamentally altering why we act in the first place. Achieving true sannyasi status in the modern world doesn't mean fleeing to the mountains or quitting your job. It means staying right where you are but dismantling your transactional expectations. By finding our ultimate reward in the mastery and execution of the craft itself, we free ourselves from the constant, exhausting calculation of return on investment. The action becomes pure, and peace becomes a dynamic state of passionate execution without the heavy baggage of expectation.
What is truly remarkable, though, is the clear point of convergence between these two philosophies. Both perspectives fundamentally agree on the text's central premise. Attaching our well-being to final outcomes is the absolute root of our suffering. Whether we do that through terrified hyper-responsibility, trying to control every variable, or through greedy transactional expectation, demanding a receipt for our effort.
Exactly. Whether you need the psychological safety of spiritual delegation or the structural shift of active renunciation, the Gita makes it clear that true peace requires showing up to our daily duties with a radically different mindset. The complexity of human psychology really demands multiple perspectives to fully appreciate the solution.
It really does. For some listeners, right now, the anxiety of control is the dominant issue. If you're managing a chaotic project or raising kids, the concept of the cosmic friend is the key that unlocks your peace.
And for others, the resentment of unrewarded effort is the dominant issue.
If you're feeling unappreciated at work or in a relationship, the discipline of the master craftsman is what sets you free. Holding both perspectives illuminates the deep, multifaceted wisdom of the Gita.
And this exploration is far from over. The source material points us toward an upcoming discussion that feels incredibly relevant to everything we've unpacked today. In our next session, we will be looking at shlokas 336 and 337, which address one of humanity's most persistent and frustrating struggles, identifying the exact force that drives us to act against our own best interests.
Oh, that is a big one. Why do we know the path to peace, yet constantly choose the path of exhaustion?
Exactly. I am very much looking forward to diving into that.
As am I. The architecture of our habits is just as complex as the architecture of our beliefs.
Indeed. So as you go back out into the friction of your daily routine, back to the inbox, back to the commute, think about that heavy, vaulted ceiling. Think about the massive stone pillar standing alone in the center of the room. You do not have to bear the entire weight of the structure by yourself. Whether you choose to share that load with a cosmic partner, or whether you choose to fundamentally redefine why you are standing there in the first place, remember that the burden is only as heavy as your attachment to it. Keep questioning, keep seeking, and we will see you next time.